If I had a magic wand and could fix anything in special education for you, what would you choose? I asked that exact question on Instagram this week, and I got so many answers, and a lot of them overlapped. We're going to talk about the top 3 things that you want fixed in special education. And although I don't have a magic wand, I do have some strategies for you so you can go forward into this school year knowing what you can do to change the outcome for a child who is receiving special education services. You might be watching this as part of the free weekly IEP training on YouTube and Facebook, or maybe you're listening to this on our Special Education Inner Circle podcast. Wherever you're at, welcome, and let's dive in. For those of you that don't know, I've been in the field professionally for over 25 years, working as a special education teacher, consultant, inclusion, kind of crisis interventionist, so many different areas I've worked in special education. But for the last basically 2 decades, I've been working for you. Parents, teachers, admins, therapists. I'm building IEPs that work for the real world. So let's go ahead and talk about these 3 things that kept on coming up over and over and over when I asked, what do you need fixed in special education? The number 1 thing that came up from both parents and teachers is inclusion. In fact, it was said that real inclusion needs to happen in schools. That was the bottom line. So I know that we can't fix inclusion everywhere with just a snap of our fingers. We don't have that magic wand, but what we do have to do as individuals working with students who all have unique needs is define what inclusion really is. I think we can agree together that inclusion is not taking a child who learns differently, who has an IEP, and plopping them into a general education situation and saying, okay, the child's now included. Inclusion is an experience, not a place. Inclusion is not about a child who learns differently hanging out with students who are considered general education. Inclusion is about being where you are accepted. Inclusion is about being in an environment that meets you where you're at. Inclusion is about being able to participate to the best of your ability in having the tools, supplies, resources to make that happen. I've shared many times that my brother, he is 43 with Down syndrome, and after navigating the public school system and having to advocate real hard, my mom had my brother's placement changed to a private therapeutic day school. Now, that was paid for by the public school system because the public school system could not provide an appropriate education. And a lot of people say, oh my goodness, how can you do that? Or how was that decision made? Because, that's taking away inclusive opportunities. No, it wasn't. It was changing the definition and what that looked like. But you know what? My brother standing on the brick wall out on the recess playground at the public school was not inclusion. And how do I know that really happened? Because I remember it. I remember it as his sister. And it's one of the reasons that I became a special education teacher. So to see my brother be fully included both in his school setting, and you know what? Who cares if everybody in his school had an IEP? Who cares? My brother was included for who he was and what his skills were, and the environment met him where he's at, and he could be on the swim team. He could be in the Christmas program. He could go on his senior trip to Disney World across the country with no parents. Yeah, that happened. So that was fully inclusive, not just in school, but it was inclusive in his community. It was inclusive for the people that he was going to be socializing with after school. It was absolutely inclusive. Now, I know many of you, that is not your definition of inclusion, and that's okay. Because what I'm asking you to do is if you want real inclusion in the schools, then you need to define what does that mean for each individual child, because all of us, I want you to reflect back on yourself here. All of us like to be included differently, right? If somebody includes me and asks me to go to the real loud party down the street, which is actually happening here in Milwaukee tonight, At the time of this recording, it is game 6 in the finals for our basketball team here for the Bucks. There's going to be 65,000 people down the street from me. And you know what? I don't want to be included. Okay. I don't want to go down there. I don't want to experience that. Everybody could support me and invite me, and I don't want to go. Okay. So we need to think about an individual child and what do they want? Where can we, of course, stretch their comfort zone? Of course, give them new experiences. Of course, we want to try things. But here's the thing. I've tried the 65,000 person crowds. It's not my thing. And that's okay. And you know what? We need to look at our students the same way. So number one, if you want to fix inclusion, it starts with defining what inclusion is for each individual child. Can we agree on that? Start the conversation there. Do not ever just use the word inclusion in a generic way when you're talking as an expert on the IEP team, and that's you. You are the expert. Whether you're a parent, teacher, admin, therapist, listening to this right now, you are an expert at the IEP table, and you should not be using inclusion in a generic term anymore. Real inclusion happens with the definition. All right, let's talk about the second thing that I saw come through that inbox over and over and over when I said, what should we fix in special education? And one person summed it up really well. It was about IEP goals, right? Like I was getting a lot of answers about IEP goals. And a teacher said, could you please fix the 32 IEP goals that I just got passed down to me? Are you kidding me? 32 IEP goals? That really summed up the intensity of what's happening when it comes to trying to help a child reach their potential or reach being prepared for further education, employment, and independent living. But 32 goals is a hot mess. And that's what I was seeing a lot of in our IEP goals. Can we please get our IEP goals to be meaningful or practical or achievable? Yes, we can. So something that you need to remember is I'm going to go right back. I just briefly mentioned it. So the purpose and findings of ideal law. We all know that every child should be receiving a free and appropriate public education, right? We're there. We call it FAPE for short, right? FAPE. We call it FAPE for short. That word appropriate is what causes a lot of tension in special education because what I think is appropriate might be different than what you think is appropriate. So we have to look at the next part of that sentence. And it says to meet a child's unique needs. Okay, got it. Let's talk about unique needs when we're talking about IEP goals. But then it says that the purpose of an IEP is to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living. There is no way that we can take 32 goals and effectively prepare a child for the future. Because even if we touched on every one of those goals during the school year, that's exactly what would happen. We would just touch on them. So why would we list out 32 things that will kind of sort of work on the best that we can when we could list a good 3, 5, maybe 7 things that we could work on in depth, that we could really go far? Because here's the thing, an IEP is the minimum of what is done for a student. It sets a foundation for what needs to be tracked, for what needs to be given to the child for this appropriate education to meet their unique needs, to prepare them for the future. This is the foundation. It should create a domino effect. I bet you if I looked at that IEP with 32 goals in it, that some of them are so overlapping and so connecting that it's really like if we would just learn this first one, the domino effect would take care of 4 other ones in that process. So I want you to get real smart in asking yourself, when you look at the IEP goal, is this something that I use in my everyday life? Like, is it important for my independence? And if it is important for your independence, it's probably important for the student's independence also. If it's something that you're thinking, I don't know if I really use this very often, I need you to think real hard if that needs to be a priority for the child to be prepared for the future. It is okay to have very focused IEP goals, knowing that if for some reason you hit all those goals within the first 6 months of school, That's awesome. The IEP doesn't go away. We continue to develop the IEP. I would rather have 2 or 3 IEP meetings virtually or doing the paperwork shuffle. There's all different ways. It doesn't mean that we all have to sit down at a big, conference table and have this formal meeting. We can actually adjust the IEP in a lot of different ways. That's for another discussion. All right. So I would rather see some really smart, prioritized goals that we would reach at maximum potential and then have to say, okay, how do we go further, than to see 32 goals that we don't master. So if your child or your student's IEP is feeling like a hot mess, like it's feeling sloppy, let's just call it that's sloppy. Somebody tried to do a really great job. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that the best of intentions weren't there. What I'm saying is that an IEP with 32 goals in it is not reasonable. Does the child have 32 things to work on? Probably. Probably has 99 things to work on. But we cannot have a document that functions like that. So this school year, do I have a magic wand that I can just go fix all the IEP goals right now? Gosh, I wish I did. I don't, but you can. You absolutely can start thinking back to the purpose and findings of ideal law and resetting your perspective on why an IEP goal is even in the IEP. Does it need to be there? Should it be there? Is it written well? Is it going to create a domino effect? Is it going to help prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living? All right, let's go on to the third one. The third one was more time to work on IEP goals. I heard this over and over, especially from teachers. Parents, just so you know, your teachers are struggling with time management, trying to get everything in that the district is requiring of them, plus providing the education that is mandated within the IEP. It is a struggle for teachers. I'm working on that behind the scenes, okay? So all the teachers that are connected inside of the special education inner circle, the master IEP coach mentorship, we're talking about how to prioritize and make sure that everything gets done in the school day. But there's something that you can do as a parent and as a teacher right now. You can make sure that the day is set up based on the IEP versus the curriculum that is not preparing a child for further education, employment, and independent living. Do you hear that distinction there? I want to make sure that the fluff, and every teacher knows, like somebody just went, she just called it out. Yeah, I did. Okay. The fluff in the school day, the fluffy stuff that is not going to get used in the future. Can we all remember some things that we learned in school that we really don't use? Or at least that feeling, right? Because I don't even know if I remember, but that feeling that you had, why am I learning this? I'm never going to use it. And you didn't. Let's take that stuff off of a child's agenda as much as possible when they have an IEP. Let's make sure that they get the fun stuff. I want that. I'm not saying take away the fun stuff, the creativity, the time to explore. That's not fluff. I'm talking about the things like, let's memorize all the presidents in order, or let's memorize something that could be Googled, that learning how to use our resources, learning how to have discernment with information, learning how to critically think and creatively solve problems is really important. There are some things that are in a child's school day. There's a lot of things in a child's school day that don't necessarily need to be there to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living. And if you lean into that, you absolutely can reschedule a child's day to have more meaning and enough time to work on the IEP goals. And you may not have enough time to work on the IEP goals because of what we just talked about in point number 2, is that there's too many to really concentrate on what is going to have the most impact in a child's outcome. All right. So we want to make sure that when you go to schedule a child's day, and parents, I want you to know what your child's schedule is. Teachers, I want you to be transparent. Parents can actually help you take some things off your plate, meaning like if you're trying to juggle things, you're like, I'm trying to fit in all of this. You know what? Let the parents help you prioritize what needs to happen. And you know what? as we're talking about prioritizing here, can we just agree to that this is not going to be the year that we pull all of the things that the student likes so we can fit in things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, vision therapy, all, physical therapy, all the things. So many times it's like, well, the child really enjoys music class, but that's the only time the speech therapist can see the child. Stop it. The child needs those things. Figure it out. Figure out how to make a better schedule. And don't take away the things that open up different learning paths for a child. Don't focus on getting the entire curriculum in plus the IEP. This takes your expertise as a teacher to figure out what needs to be in there, and it takes communication with the parent to figure out what the child's day looks like to make sure that the child is getting everything that they need, but it's not overwhelming, and we're not playing catch up at the end of the quarter trying to figure out how to take all the data and all the goals that we kind of sort of, got to, but not really, because we were too worried about making sure that they got every piece of everything else. That's impossible. It's impossible. Stop trying to do that. So there's 3 things that you can definitely go back, take some notes, and think about, how am I going to strategically approach this upcoming school year to make sure that a child is getting real inclusive experiences, to make sure that their IEP goals are meaningful and they're preparing them for further education, employment, independent living, and that their school day reflects the priorities that are needed to ensure that they are prepared for the future. All of those things are adjustable. All of those things are possible. And if you're thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to do those things, I want to encourage you to connect with me outside of this podcast, outside of, if you're watching on YouTube, outside of YouTube, outside of Facebook. We go in depth inside of the Special Education Inner Circle Professional Development Program. Inside of the Special Education Inner Circle Professional Development Program, you get monthly in-depth strategies on how to approach special education for real results. It's the only program that encourages parents, teachers, admins, therapists to all show up together and train together. Did you know that 86% of parents and teachers have never trained together for the IEP or in special education, yet we're expected to sit at an IEP table and work together. And that's exactly why my trainings are not built just for teachers. They're not built just for parents. They're built for the experts on the IEP team, and that's you. Parents, teachers, admins, therapists. I hope to see you inside of the Special Education Inner Circle. Hop on over to specialedinnercircle.com so we can continue this conversation. And don't forget those 3 steps that I just gave you to help make a child's school day meaningful, effective, rewarding, and preparing them for the future. I'll talk to you guys soon.